From the director of the solo superhero movie defending its ugly visuals, to the film earning a disappointingly low revenue because of it. This is everything you need to know about The Flash's terrible CGI. Despite fans calling them awful, the director actually defended them. You gotta hear this one to believe it. The director has said that some of the terrible CGI in the film was on purpose. Maybe they wanted to give viewers a crash course in special effects gone wrong. Yeah, it's that bad. Even though the movie got some good reviews before it came out, one of the major complaints was how the CGI looked. Like, it was downright awful. And it's not just The Flash. Superhero movies in general are getting a lot of flack for their CGI these days. Marvel Studios, in particular, is catching some heat. VFX artists are saying that working for them has become a total nightmare. They're calling it horrible. Even critics are making fun of it. The Flash is racing its way into theaters. And while the Hollywood Handle gave it props for being fun and action-packed, they couldn't help but throw shade at the CGI, calling it terrible and the third act weak. They basically said, yeah, it's a decent superhero flick, but those CGI moments and the ending could have been better. And sadly for the film, it's not just them complaining about how it looks. Turns out, a lot of people are not holding back with their opinions. Take prominent YouTuber Beardo Benjo, for example. After watching the movie, he had a field day poking fun at the CGI, even comparing it to PS3 cutscene level. He was particularly fixated on those full-on CGI humans that popped up. You know, the ones resembling late actors. According to him, it was so absurdly bad that it had them in stitches. But wait, there's more. One fan took it a step further and said that the CGI in The Flash was absolutely awful, just like what we saw in the later seasons of the CW's The Flash show. Yikes. It seems like the movie unintentionally paid tribute to those questionable CGI moments from the TV series, and if you thought that was enough, another fan went all out, claiming that the Speed Force cameos in The Flash actually looked worse than the infamous CGI mustache cover-up job from Justice League back in 2017. So just why does the film look the way that it does? Well, according to the creators, it's to show a distorted adventure in superspeed. Director Andy Muschietti and producer Barbara Muschietti spilled the beans on why the movie's opening scene, where the Flash saves a bunch of babies from a collapsing building, looked a bit unusual. It turns out it was all part of the plan. Barbara jokingly said, "Oh yeah, those were all real babies we used." But then Andy stepped in to give us the real scoop. He explained that the distorted look we saw was actually intentional. It was part of the design to capture Barry Allen's superspeed perspective. You see, the whole idea was to put us right in the Flash's shoes. So everything was deliberately distorted in terms of lights and textures. It was like diving into a water world of sorts, experiencing the world through Barry's point of view. So, if you found it a bit weird or different, don't worry, that was totally intended. It's pretty neat, gotta give them credit for their creative approach. But I guess the DC fans still weren't having it. The Flash even got compared to one of Dwayne Johnson's films. We all know that Black Adam didn't impress audiences or make a big impact at the box office, which left fans feeling a bit let down. But here's the kicker. When the Ezra Miller-led film The Flash hit the screens, superhero fans couldn't help but notice something familiar, and it wasn't Black Adam. Curious. So, this person on Twitter decided to point out the not-so-impressive CGI and VFX in The Flash. They compared the shoddy pixelation of various characters, backgrounds, and action sequences to none other than Dwayne Johnson's The Scorpion King. Yep, they said that the CGI in The Flash looks like the same crap they used to make the Scorpion King in Mummy Returns back in 2001. That's brutal. This comparison started making the rounds even more after director Andy Muschietti claimed that the iffy CGI in The Flash was actually done intentionally. In response to that tweet, another user chimed in, bringing up the poor CGI in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, saying that the CGI work done on The Flash makes that Marvel movie look like a masterpiece. Yeah, it's really a terrible situation. Like, effects are early 2000s kind of bad. It's a shame because it's a somewhat enjoyable film. And there's more. Another user commented on The Flash saying that there just wasn't a lot to say about the film. They didn't find a lot of it to make sense. But of course, even the enjoyable parts had to be ruined by the CGI. It's so atrociously bad in some segments that they were starting to think they wanted it to look bad on purpose, like they were going for an intentionally artificial look, which of course is kind of what they were going for, but this style of VFX work still didn't feel like a good fit for everyone. Though it's not just because of Andy's decision that it looks so bad. Turns out, there are a bunch of reasons why the VFX looks the way that it does. It's no secret that these superhero films used to blow fans away, but lately, they've been getting the opposite reaction from the fans for the disappointing digital designs, especially in this post-pandemic era. One of the main reasons behind this is the insane amount of content being churned out. Just look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with its 3 movies and 3 series slated for release this year, and DC bringing us 4 big blockbusters. VFX houses are swamped like never before. Now, as for The Flash's terrible CGI, it's hard to say if it was truly intentional, as Andy Muschietti claims. Maybe the filmmaker is just trying to find a way to justify those moments that didn't quite hit the mark. Considering The Flash reportedly had a whopping $220 million production budget, making it one of DC's most expensive movies ever. It's possible that the studio didn't want to shell out any more money to improve the bad scenes. Money talks, right? While the Speedster solo movie did have some visually impressive moments, there were also instances where things went downhill fast. One of the biggest culprits was the superhero cameos, which looked totally unrealistic and unconvincing. And speaking of the budget, with all this criticism, the film may not even make all of it back, since it made a disappointingly low debut of just $55 million. The box office showdown between The Flash and Pixar's Elemental was supposed to be the big kickoff for the summer blockbuster season. But unfortunately, both movies fell way short of expectations. The Flash stumbled out of the gate, while Elemental didn't fare much better, collecting a mere $29.5 million in their opening weekend. And that's not even the worst part. Both of the films were pricey projects, costing a whopping $200 million to make and an additional $100 million to market. So not only were these films just not as entertaining as fans hoped, but they also ended up being huge disappointments in terms of box office success. Leading up to the release of The Flash, the big shots at Warner Brothers were on a mission to convince the public that this film was one for the superhero history books. They had newly minted DC Studios co-chief James Gunn declaring it as one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Talk about setting the bar high. But sadly, despite all the hype and praise from the folks behind the film, opening weekend audiences didn't quite share the same enthusiasm. They gave it a lukewarm B cinema score. It looks like most moviegoers weren't fully convinced by the glowing praise. Without positive audience ratings or a strong word of mouth, The Flash might struggle to bounce back in the coming weeks, especially with heavy hitters like Indiana Jones and The Dial of Destiny hitting theaters on June 30th and Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer on July 21st. So from the film earning a disappointingly low revenue, to the director of the solo superhero movie defending its ugly visuals. That's all for the director's take on The Flash having terrible CGI.